As Donald Trump continues his battle against voter fraud, the path to victory is almost identical to the one he sought to undertake on Election Day itself. He must solidify his support in the Southeast, from North Carolina to Florida, hold on to the traditional Republican stronghold to the west in Arizona, and then moves north to the Rust Belt to take one or two bricks out of that blue wall. The first hurdle in Georgia is being overcome now. The hand recount and audit has unearthed 2,600 votes that now move Trump closer towards overturning that lead that Biden has built up there. And our good friends at Project Veritas are exposing some of the fraudulent activity still going on, even now, in the audit and this recount. This is Political Election 2020. And just before we jump into this one, as we say every time, if you do enjoy the content, please consider giving us a subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you will be told when we do release new videos. And give us a like, give us a comment down below. Let us know what you think so we can have a discussion about what's going on down there. Okay, so let's move into it. So we got this from the New York Post. Georgia finds 2,600 uncounted ballots. Secretary of State says GOP strong-arming him. Okay. Election official strong-arming me into counting all the votes. Oh, how dare they? Election officials in Georgia found some 26 uncounted ballots from a Republican-leaning section of the state, but the votes were not expected to be enough to flip the state from a Joe Biden win. A report said Monday the uncounted ballots from Floyd County in the northwestern section of the state, a GOP stronghold, could narrow Biden's 14,000 vote lead, but not be enough to change the outcome of the race. The votes were left uncounted because election workers didn't upload the votes from a memory card into a ballot scanning machine, according to the report. The chairman of the Floyd County Republican Party, Luke Martin, told the newspaper that the issue didn't appear to be widespread. It's very concerning, Martin said, but it doesn't appear to be a widespread issue. I'm glad the audit revealed it, and it's important that all the votes are counted. So it seems it's like, no, there can be no voter fraud. And then we find a little bit of evidence. Well, you know, look, there was that one bit of evidence, but there can't be any more. And then a bit more comes out. Oh, well, yeah, there's that as well. But look, definitely there's no more. That seems to be the kind of trend that we're going towards, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And this just underlines the point that we have to investigate and we have to look at all of these things. And listen, it might be the case. It isn't a great number of votes that were found, is it? If it doesn't change the outcome of the race, that's fine. But every single vote matters. Remember what the left was saying before this election, you know, count every vote matters. They've just thrown that by the wayside because it doesn't suit them anymore. We've always said that if Trump loses the election legitimately, we're all going to accept it. And further, I'll go a bit further. I'd say I'll condemn anyone who doesn't, because kind of the idea of the USA is more important than Donald Trump. But there's just so many shady instances, so many doubts. And as you say, they keep moving the goalposts further and further back. And, oh, yeah, this is the last thing. Oh, don't worry about that, and that. It all has to be investigated. And I don't understand how anybody who appreciates democracy or the rule of law can continue to ignore this any further.
Yeah, like we saw from some studies that have been done recently, questionnaires, more people think that Trump won than didn't. Like, more people think that, which means some Democrats think that as well. Or maybe just all the people that voted for Trump think that. But, you know, if people do think that, then we can't have that going forward, or we're going to have a situation where, like we did with Russia, you know, in this witch hunt, that, oh, you know, Trump's, like, many people still believe today, like, you know, they believe, like Adam Schiff, who's like, oh yeah, I've seen the evidence, it will come out eventually. And it almost seemed like every day it was, oh yeah, it's going to happen, there's going to be this thing. We're going to end up like that for 4 years, like, oh yeah, no, definitely election fraud is going to happen now. If we don't just do the investigation, count all the votes, make sure that everyone's happy with it, and then we can come out it and go, well, you know what, Trump lost, but you know, listen, we're going to win the next one, right? Or it could be that we find out that there was fraud, and then the rightful winner does win, and we're like, oh, well, thank God for that. I would have really hate to think that Biden was the president for 4 years, or however long he lasts, illegitimately, because what a stain that would be on the American system, as you say, on democracy. So it's in everyone's interest for all of this process to be carried out. Why are they trying to like stop it? Why are they trying to like hamstring all the efforts to, make sure that everything's been done correctly and legitimately? When you have so many people that are concerned about it, you have to do that. You have no option.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'd probably say, judging from, if you look at any election across the world, this is a far left thing, okay? Because the far left, in almost no countries do far left ideals, far left radicals gain power democratically. Why? Because a real election establishes the trust and the consent of the people. And the people don't want far left radicals in power. But far left doesn't need it, do they? They can turn that around and they can inject their candidate, they can thrust their candidate on the population under the assumption that, once we get our candidate in, everything will become better. Everything, the end justifies the means. And if the electoral system has to die in order for us to achieve our goals, so be it. This is what happens when you work with radicals, okay? And if you look at the Democratic Party, if you look at AOC, Ilhan Omar, and all this far left, just this surge of kind of revolutionary sentiment from the Democratic Party, it's very clear to me they see Biden being in power as the end justifying the means. And so they'll hand wave away, or they don't need to establish a trust. They don't need to try to establish the consent of the people, because ultimately it's getting Trump out and getting Biden in that matters way, way more to them than the ideals of the USA. And that is sad.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, as well, let's have a look at this. This is from Project Veritas, who have exposed quite a considerable amount of stuff recently, and it's led to investigations being open. We saw that in Minnesota. They opened an investigation to what was going on there. We saw that in Texas. They opened an investigation to see what was going on. So for all the people who go, oh, Project Veritas, oh no, it's all lies. Well, they're bringing light to situations that then lead to investigations being opened. That's only a good thing. Right, so regardless of what you think of James O'Keefe, but let's play this video. This is from a guy who is a poll watcher who was who's been watching the recount process, I think in Cobb County in Georgia. Take a look at this.
Second person is supposed to be checking it, right? So 3 times in 3 minutes she called out Biden. The second auditor caught it, and she said, no, this is Trump. That's just while I'm standing there. So does the second checker catch it every time? But this way, in 3 times in 3 minutes, from 209 to 212, she got a 3 wrong.
That's just in the short time that you were
And I was standing there. And does it get corrected every time? Because the next table I went to right after that, the only reason I left that table is because there was one where the first person was reading it off, handing it to her. She's not even looking at it, she's just putting it in.
Putting it in which set?
Whatever one the first person said. So table 17 was the first one where the woman got it wrong 3 times. Table 18 was where the first person called out Biden or Trump. She passed across the table. The other person did not even look at it, just put it wherever the first person said. That person is supposed to be auditing it, checking the second one. And so here's what happened after that. So I go and report it. They say, oh, we'll talk to the election officials. Blah, 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 blah. They tell her, hey, I guess they talked to her. And so I come back by again in a few minutes. She's not doing that after they've talked to her. So I come and stand next to her, and she goes like this. Like being all cutesy about it, being
snarky.
Yeah, so I keep walking, I turn around, I look, and she's looking at me walking away as she's getting handed more ballots. So she's watching me. That's when things start getting real shady, like really like tense and calm. Because no matter where I was standing in the room, her and a couple other people started, they were calling their boss over there, pointing at me. I haven't touched anybody, I haven't talked to anybody, I haven't done anything. All I'm doing is writing down, observing, telling what happened. So I see they're all talking to her, and they keep pointing over here. Well, I make another slow lap around the room, and as I come back behind her, she says, I'm paid by the taxpayer, and these watching me.
So we said, we've been saying on a number of occasions leading up to this, when we're talking about voter fraud, it doesn't have to be like this grand conspiracy. It can be just individuals who think, as you sort of pointed out before, who think that the ends justify the means. They think Trump is so bad. The guy's literally Hitler. that they justify their actions even though they're committing election fraud. And we've seen this here with this guy, and this is just one instance. This is the one that we know about. It could be happening everywhere on a big grand scale for all we know.
I mean, the parallel I'll draw it to is actually the way a terrorist would operate. Okay, so not every single terror attack originates in ISIS headquarters, right? What they rely on is a radicalization of a certain section of people, and from that people, certain individuals will emerge who carry out the terror attacks on their own. Working towards the same goal, more or less. Well, the same thing could happen here. The Democrats have pumped out for 4 years nonsense about Trump being the illegitimate president, that he's a fascist and a racist. So all they need to do is have one person willing to act who's in the right place at the right time, and this can create a scenario where voter fraud is present. But furthermore to that, it can just be laziness and inaction too. Okay, and when the journalist was talking about these kind of Georgia workers, it's very it could just be the case that these people want to go home to their families and have a beer after a long day at work, right? And so they're just kind of rushing through the process. So that can take place too, which makes it even worse. What I would like to have seen, and there is such a furor about the integrity of the election, when the eyes of the world are on Georgia, is for these people to be kind of a bit more, I don't know what the word is, just a bit more conscious, a bit more professional. Really, 3 times in 2 minutes, I'm starting to doubt whether this was a mistake at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a good analogy that you came up there with the ISIS. Someone's going, oh my God, he's comparing, Biden to ISIS or whatever. Like, that's not what you're actually doing. You're using that to draw an example, which makes sense. And I think it's a good analogy. But yeah, and I hadn't really considered that as well. This, like, most people that voted for Biden voted for him through the mail-in ballots, and the process to authenticate a mail-in ballot is a longer process than just one that's coming on election day, because most of the validating is done on the day when they come and when they go, yeah, you're on the register, and then once they're in with the ballot, they're in with the ballot, right? Whereas with the mail-in, they've got to check the signatures, unpack it, blah blah blah, and all this. So it makes sense that when you've got all of these ballots, so many more than they've ever seen before, but they've got basically the same number of people, then like you say, it could be like maybe down to laziness. Like, all of these little factors play in, because they're going to skip corners, aren't they, on the mail-in ballots, more so than they are the ones that have come in person. And we've seen from the statistics of the ones that have been thrown out that the number of mail-in ballots that have got through the process is much higher. I think it was like 26 times higher or something like mental like that, in terms of like the ones that were invalidated. It's like that number is 26 times lower, I should say, than the number that were invalidated as a percentage normally during an election for mail-in ballots, because people make mistakes on them all the time, because there's so many like hoops that you have to jump through to get it right. And we've not seen that. So like all of these different factors come in together to create a kind of scenario where one candidate is favored dramatically over the other, and you've got to just keep picking away at it one little bit at a time, going, yeah, and there's a bit going on there, there's a bit going on there, there's a bit going on there, and it doesn't have to be, as we keep saying, this widespread conspiracy. It can just be all these little individual factors. And I don't think that's something that people consider often. So yeah, I mean, do you have anything to add from there?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, so listen, we're going to expect the total counts in Georgia tomorrow night. I think they've given them the deadline by tomorrow night. So we'll kind of have, hopefully, an idea, as long as they're not further challenged from there, of what's going on. And if the recount does actually show up anything, if the audit shows up anything on a wider scale, or if this is going to be the only example of this and what's happening. So yeah, as we said before, if you do enjoy the content, give us a subscribe, because we'll definitely be reporting on that and talking about that in later videos. But until then, thank you for watching.